Warning, this video is intended for persons 13 years and over. Though the video's subject matter is media often aimed at children, it is talked about from an adult perspective. Thus it may contain language and themes unsuitable for younger audiences. What up, snitches? I'm the Animaniac, and I just came back from a hunting trip bagging myself a great buck. So what's on the docket this week? I'm just gonna go put this carcass in the garage to gut later. This is Bambi. Directed by David Hand, the same guy who helmed Snow White, it's a coming-of-age story about a deer named Bambi, growing up in a forest, occasionally having to deal with hunters, one of which who killed his mother. Production began when a director and producer from MGM, Sidney Franklin, sold the rights to Disney in 1937, after he found trying to make a live-action film adaptation of Felix Salten's Bambi: A Life in the Woods impossible to shoot at the time. But the project was put off to work on other movies because they realized it would be too difficult to animate deer realistically, and because Walt found the book too grim and somber for a light-hearted Disney movie. I read the Wikipedia plot summary of the book and thought it sounded more interesting than the movie we got this week. Maybe they'll keep it in mind for the live-action remake they'll obviously do. Now here's a shock for you. On top of this movie underperforming financially, it was also the first one to have mixed critical reception when it came out. Criticism was aimed at the lack of fantasy elements and people being unable to stomach the story of animals struggling to survive in the woods whilst being hunted by man. In a 1942 edition of Outdoor Life magazine, the editor Raymond Brown called the film the worst insult ever offered to any form of American sportsman. Who knew this movie would be so polarizing in 1942? Like the others that came before it, it recouped its losses from a series of reissues between 1947 and 1988, sitting at a lifetime box office gross of $267 million. And the film is regarded as a classic today. It has been featured on several countdown lists like Time magazine's top 25 horror films of all time, if you can believe that. And at the time of writing this video, the film holds a 90% Rotten Tomatoes critical score. This is the last Disney movie to come out of the 40s to have very impressive backgrounds. The forest looks very realistic, and judging by a puddle I saw at the end of the Little April shower sequence, I see the artists learned a lot from their time on Pinocchio. And not only does the forest look realistic, it's made so you know where your eyes can focus on right away, by giving the foreground a lot of detail and making the backgrounds blurry and minimally detailed. And during the scene where all the deer ran from the hunters, the light from the sun hitting the deer in the meadow as they ran for the surrounding forest continued this approach to the backgrounds, especially at the end where a gunshot goes off and the deer running off are gold yellow. Hang on, There we go. And like with a lot of the other films up until this point, they studied real animals in order to capture the movement for the movie. Though there were deer in Snow White, an animator named Eric Larson said they moved like big flour sacks. Given how those deer were background characters in Snow White, it would make sense to study real deer, seeing the movie is about one. And while that study paid off in the film, they exaggerated Bambi's face to give him personality. Before I go any further, I'd like to give you guys a spoiler warning in case you still want to see this movie. Good. Now let's continue with the changes to the source material. Like with Bunnicula, I'll be going off the book's Wikipedia articles, so feel free to fill me in on what I may have missed in the comments below. Now the first 40 minutes of this 1-hour film gets the gist of what happens in the book. During said section of the film, when they get to the first meadow scene, they leave out the detail of Farlene being Bambi's cousin. I'm glad they did because... I said earlier in the video that Disney thought the book was too grim and somber for the studio's usual fare. But isn't the story about growing up and learning how to survive in the forest and protect others against humans? I'm sure that after Bambi's mother got shot by hunters, we would have seen the kid learn some tricks from the Great Prince that would come up later on in the climax. Then again, because of the studio's financial troubles, 12 minutes had to be cut before it was animated, which could have filled in those blanks, thus making for a more engaging story. Whatever the cause, it resulted in Bambi being the weakest film out of the studio's early years. While it's as visually impressive as Pinocchio and Fantasia, it lacks the emotional punch of even the cheapest of the group, Dumbo. In other words, Bambi was afraid to take a bullet. And ironically, it slows to a stop in the matter of being acceptable. Not to mention all the original material they came up with when they were developing the script, including a squirrel and chipmunk duo who acted like Laurel and Hardy as comic relief, but their parts were scaled back to only silent cameos in the movie, and some other stuff that they thought wasn't relevant enough to be in it, like an image of dancing leaves as they fall to the ground. Maybe the leaves could have worked as a way for Bambi to go from being a kid to being an adult. Again, something they could keep in mind for the live-action remake that sadly no one is going to see because people are catching on to how manipulative the tactic is. Guys, what are your thoughts on this deer? Comment below. If you guys want to stay updated on future videos and see some cool artwork, be sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and DeviantArt, and be sure to subscribe to my backup channel over on BitChute. The links are in the description, and if you want to be the first to know when a new video will be up, ring that bell after you subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.